Hey everybody, this is Jeff Newton. I'm not talking about Minnesota tonight. This story about Greenland is far more serious than most Americans understand, and I want to give them an opportunity to understand it, so I want to walk them through it. It's not really a story about just an island being stolen by an evil bastard. It's got far more reaching implications than people can think of. I'm Jeff Newton, former 60 Minutes producer, former senior producer at Vice on HBO and National Geographic Television. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let me first just start talking about how icky it feels, right? Invading Greenland. We're talking about an island of vulnerable people with their own culture, their own way of life, who've never bothered anybody and always kept to themselves. I think about how we came to America. We came and claimed the land and forced the indigenous people off their land, stuck them on reservations and claimed it as our own. And it seems that with all those hundreds of years of history to reflect upon, there's still some people who do not understand just how morally and ethically wrong it is to steal the land and heritage from another group of people. I don't think shame is a word that Donald Trump understands either. Even after that stint at Wharton Business School, he doesn't seem to have learned very much about anything. Trump's one of those guys that probably still thinks a good old John Wayne movie is worth watching. Cowboys and Indians fighting it out, America breaking treaties, killing the savages, skinning the buffaloes out of existence, and Americans always portrayed as the heroes. Well, Greenland is the new wild, wild west, and instead of stealing the buffaloes, he's aiming to grab the minerals, these rare earth minerals that are used in the tech industry, in the name of national security. So let's talk about the wisdom of this plan, America's great next conquest. Trump's made it clear that anything short of owning Greenland, like it's some wild Louisiana purchase, just won't work for him. And if he has to, he'll take control of the country, quote, the hard way. Our fearless 5-time draft-dodging commander-in-chief apparently thinks everything is a deal to be made. Greenland is an island, and we all know how much he likes islands, don't we? I think he probably thinks he's going to slip a few golf courses on the island, and while his friend Peter Thiel sort of skips on over and steals the rare earth minerals, but Greenland isn't one of those buildings that he's able to slap his name on. Decisions he's making now will have existential repercussions to our nation's future, well beyond this lightly populated and proud island. Let's be crystal clear. The moment American troops hit the ground in Greenland, the world as we know it ends. Starting the very next day after the U.S. lands its troops to seize control, the global response will be immediate. Immediate. The consequences will be permanent and they'll last for future generations, well beyond our lifetime, because it will signal to the world that they can no longer trust us. And no change in government 3 years from now, not even 10, will convince Western powers that they can invest in our friendship beyond the timeline of a single presidential term. What happens first? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is done, over, completely gone. 75 years of military and political cooperation chucked in the garbage in a single day. As we currently stand, NATO has sent a handful of NATO countries to Greenland. Sweden, Norway, France, Germany, all have sent some troops. Additionally, the Netherlands and Canada will be deploying forces to the Danish territory in the high north. Officially, this is all to take part in a planned NATO military exercise, Operation Arctic Endurance. NATO's exercise will not send enough of a hint to our fearless leader to get him to stand down. Trump's probably, he's not good at listening. He's not good at hearing anything. All the while, he's telling us we should, be weary of having China and Russia taking Greenland over. Denmark has been safeguarding Greenland for 325 years at least, 75 more years than we've been a fucking country. As for his claim that we can't allow Russia to be this close to us, I'll remind you that Greenland's 2,000 miles away, and Alaska and Russia are separated by only a mere 6 miles. You remember that? Sarah Palin talked about it. She said she could see it from her backyard. I mean, just to be honest, she didn't really, it's kind of a low blow. She didn't really say that. She didn't say she could see from backyard. What she actually said was, they're our next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska, from an island in Alaska. That's what she said. But I think you get the point. You can't say we don't want Russia being so close to us when they're 2,000 miles away if they were to take Greenland, when actually we're only 6 miles from it in Alaska, right? I can't believe I just quoted fucking Sarah Palin to prove a political point. God help me. Anyway, that's the background. A little more inside baseball now. Why it matters beyond the island in question. NATO is held together by something called the Article 5 of the NATO Charter. It's a commitment from all 32 NATO countries that if there's an attack on one, there's an attack on all. This is something that we thought up generations ago because we were worried about Russia coming in and picking off each country one by one. And we figured there was strength in numbers. So NATO formed, and these countries acted as one so that Russia would be deterred from attacking any European countries. If the United States attacks Denmark, well, it's not really Denmark, it's a territory of Denmark. If they attack Greenland, we're breaking that sacred treaty, essentially attacking ourselves as a member of NATO. And Greenland is protected under that charter as a territory of Denmark. To put it bluntly, we would be triggering Article 5 of the NATO Charter against ourselves. NATO dissolves overnight. Europe would either kick us out or reform a military alliance in some other form itself, probably with Canada thrown in for good measure. Okay, we wouldn't be just losing an ally. Let's get this straight. We would be creating a new enemy. In fact, we would be creating 32 new enemies. No longer will the U.S. have a simple, straightforward defensive strategy like worrying about China or Russia or Iran or North Korea. Instead, almost the entire industrialized world would now hate us. The military repercussions will be swift and humiliating. Europe will begin seizing or forcing the closure of every U.S. military base in Europe. Some European leaders have said as much this past week. Ramstein Air Force Base, where all of our heavy lifting air capacity runs for the U.S. military, shut down. Aviano Air Base in Italy, where we ran sorties in the fight against Serbia in the Kosovo War, shuttered. As many as 40 U.S. bases would be shuttered. Agreements from our most loyal allies torn to fucking shreds, leaving a good portion of the Western world without American troops on the ground for the first time since World War II and the end of the Cold War. Now, U.S. troop numbers, around 80 to 84,000 personnel, sent home forever. Our ability to project power globally, smashed to bits by one man's careless decision. Americans will be humiliated in the eyes of the world on top of that, evicted like a shitty tenant who didn't know the rules of their generous lease. Where does that leave us? In the end, we'll be asking ourselves, how do we project power into Africa? You know, AFRICOM, the African Command, is based out of Europe. The Middle East, we have some bases there, but do we really want to leave our power projection in the hands of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Oman? Are they going to become our new go-to? Allowing Islamic kingdoms to twist and turn and on their whims to get us to maintain our presence there seems odd. I've been thinking a lot about Vladimir Putin today as well. You know, he's sitting there on the sidelines laughing his drunken little head off as we destroy NATO for him. Ukraine, good luck keeping him out of that country after the fall of NATO. Then comes the economic fallout for us. The European Union is the largest single market in the world, period. So how will we feel when our former European partners begin to call our U.S. debt and selling off our U.S. dollars? You see, war doesn't have to be kinetic. Sometimes killing an economy will do more damage than dropping bombs. Are we ready for the value of the U.S. dollar collapsing and the euro and the pound becoming the new world currency? American exceptionalism will start looking pretty less exceptional when inflation skyrockets and America's life savings evaporate before their very eyes. Then there's the question of what will happen to American businesses here and abroad. Like U.S. bases, corporate America will be expelled from European markets. U.S. jobs will go with it. Trillions of dollars in market capitalization will evaporate before our eyes, creating a market not seen since the Great Depression. The once powerful U.S. market will be decapitated within days. Our global reach sequestered to our lonely shores forever. If it does ever recover, it won't be in my lifetime. Donald Trump, 79, swollen ankles, he won't care because he won't be here to help us pick up the pieces. At that point, I hope you all have private jets. because it won't be long before European carriers might not be so excited to fly to and from the shores of their new enemy. And supply chain issues during the New World Order will make COVID look like normal. If we want to rely less on China going forward, forget about it. In short, the transatlantic superhighways between us and Europe that we have come to rely on, both in the skies and across the seas, will cease to exist. You think United Airlines and American Airlines will do well when their transatlantic routes are summarily closed by European aviation authorities? How about American travelers trying to take summer vacays to places like London, Paris, Milan? You can kiss the visa-free travel goodbye, if they let us in at all. And if you're working or living abroad, forget about that little perk of being, a friend to Europe. Those claiming alliance to the red, white, and blue will become persona non grata, unwelcome strangers. Americans could see themselves actually even being deported, or worse, jailed. Like what's happening in Minneapolis, on the streets there. Deportations are not just for brown people anymore, right? How will plane manufacturers like Boeing be impacted when nobody wants to buy U.S. aircraft anymore? Airbus will be happy. How will American defense contractors who make hundreds of billions of dollars each year by selling their products to Europe feel when former allies cancel all their military contracts? In 2024, the number was a record for foreign military sales, $117 billion, worth nearly 17,000 open cases and contracts still on the table, worth nearly $1 trillion in weapons sales. I think the number was actually like $850 billion. When all that goes away, as it must, because you cannot sell American weapons to your enemies, where will that leave American defense contractors and the tens of thousands of Americans who are impacted by that? It won't be great for the U.S. economy, that's for sure. If you believe Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, he says we're already bleeding as many as 20,000 jobs a month in the Trump economy. No wonder Donald Trump wants him gone. This is the end of trust, and it does not reset. You cannot invade a democratic ally and then say, my bad, 4 years later. Prior to Trump's Greenland grab, NATO never worried we would be anything but their patriotic friends who pushed the Germans out of France and back into Germany. We were the country whose graves in Europe were adorned by flowers laid by thankful townspeople all across Europe. The saviors of so many democracies, our grandfathers, fought and died through 2 world wars, sometimes fighting for yards, now thrown away like a bad pair of dirty old shoes. The accomplishments of our parents and grandparents forever stained by the actions of a selfish narcissist. The psychological break will be permanent. Europe will realize that the United States is no longer a partner, but a predator. They will erect their own national defense systems, their own financial systems, and their own alliances. For the first time in our lifetime, those systems and critical alliances will not include the United States of America. The West, which our forefathers fought and died for, will continue. But our nation will no longer be a part of it. And Donald Trump, with his narcissistic ways and inability to reason and compromise or have empathy, will throw the United States into the diplomatic darkness. There will be no more favors, no more love, no more walks with the king at Buckingham Palace to inspect the guards. And a whole nation will be in economic pain for decades to come, long after this madman is eaten by the worms and buried on one of his fucking golf courses. Like, follow, and share, please. Greenland's important. It's not just an island. Thanks, Misfits. Spread the word.